How's it going, guys? Balder here, and it has been a while, without a doubt. But anyway, a new module came out, and this is the MiG-19. It is a second-generation Soviet fighter that has seen some combat in Vietnam, both with the Vietnamese against the United States and against Cambodia in the Vietnamese-Cambodian War. But I'm just going to give you a little bit of detail into how this plane works. As you can tell, the way that you start this up, well, I'm not exactly doing it by the book, but what I've learned is that the best way to start it up, or one way you could start it up, is that you can flip all the switches up, start the engines. Of course, you have to hook up the ground power as well, but basically, it's one of those cases where you flip all the switches on, you turn the oxygen on, start the engines, close the canopy. You're good to go. There are some other things as well, but if we are talking strictly getting the plane up and running, then that's how you do it. Of course, radar is a completely different story, so are the weapons. However, at the end of the day, all of it is pretty simple. One of the things that you'll notice is that it does take a while for the engines to spool up. This is going to take a little bit longer than the MiG-15, even though that the way you start up the engine is quite a bit more simple, which is something I can never really complain about. What I can complain about, however, is just how finicky the throttle is. Just take a look at how easy it is for you to lose control when you're taxiing. Again, it's either you don't move at all, or you move way too quickly, and you're always riding the brake. And that cutoff is going to be about 10,000 RPMs. So yeah, as you can tell, this taxi is very, very quick, but that's something that is kind of unavoidable if I were to say so myself. But as I'm taxiing along, just a few other features that you need to understand. It is actually a pretty maneuverable aircraft. But it does have some very interesting little quirks. For example, if you take a look at the attitude indicator, you'll actually notice that the blue side of the ball is actually upside down, as opposed to the brown side of it. Now, the reason for that is because it's actually inverted. I have no idea why they had that design choice, but you're going to see. And I can imagine that in such a situation, people may actually get themselves in trouble doing so. Let's say you're in clouds, you're inverted, and all of a sudden you see that the blue side is facing up. Well, you'd normally in that circumstance pull up. Of course, doing so will land you face first into the ground, so that's kind of the unfortunate thing about it. But anyway, we'll just disable the nose wheel steering and then get this thing taken off. So yeah, one thing that is also a little bit interesting quirk is that I have this at full throttle and it's not giving me any afterburner. Now the reason for that is because there is an afterburner switch. It doesn't necessarily matter because it easily gets up to speed very quickly. So once you do get up to speed, you just rotate and there you go. Lift up the gear and then get rid of the flaps. That point. As such. Then the button that I just clicked actually enables the afterburner. And once you do that, this thing becomes very inefficient, so to say. As in, way, way, way inefficient. Of course, it is an afterburner. I'm giving it too much crap. But that's kind of the observation that I've seen. But, in terms of maneuverability, it's quite good. As you can see, it can pull a lot of G's, enough G's to make you black out, and it has enough for you to climb. Now, it is a little bit weird because I did struggle a little bit in this climb. As you can tell, it let off quite a bit of speed, but it definitely gets the job done. So with that said, let's go ahead and get very close to the buildings in Nelchik. This is like my go-to playground, as you can no doubt tell. Granted, I don't think I'm making any Kabardians happy. I always fly ridiculously close to these buildings, which is always good, but kind of goes to show that these things are very maneuverable and can change at a moment's notice. Then of course, once you get out of town, things start to get a little bit easier. Because as we all know, once we get out of the town, this is when I start to do the mountain flying, and this is where things get very, very, very interesting. As you can no doubt tell, you have what is the prehistoric version of Bitching Betty telling me that I am way too close to the ground. Unfortunately, that is something that I must do. I know it kind of gets annoying and tiring after a while, but I must do it for the sake of science and to get a YouTube video. The other thing that's really interesting is that while the taxiing part of this plane is a total bitch, it's a total bitch because there is a very good power to weight ratio on this plane. If you haven't noticed, it does haul ass, and I'm about 80% on the throttle. Still getting the job done, still maneuvering. You can tell it's getting slower, but at no point am I actually losing any type of control. I'm just slowly flying along, flying at a very low altitude, granted, but still, I am in control. Even as I fly close to the forest, even though I fly over villages and whatnot, I don't really need to increase the throttle. Now it's time to switch things up a bit. And of course, how could it be complete with the ever so infamous mountain test, which I've never failed. And that's not to brag, but maybe this infamous mountain test isn't exactly infamous. I mean, this is a fighter jet after all, so it probably isn't that hard to put it into a straight climb. Of course, I absolutely love doing this. Hugging the mountains like it's nobody's business. Watching as you are in total control of the plane. Even when pulling on some fairly high Gs, I at no point ever felt that I was not in control. The closest I may have gotten was actually this one. Now, the other thing that's very interesting is that, remember how I said that it takes a while for the engines to start up? Well, I am going to give you a demonstration on how that might be detrimental. Alright, so now both the engines have flamed out. We are at a very high altitude, of course. So what I'm going to do is that I'm going to pull the throttle back, then I am going to do an air start on both the engines. Alright, so just be aware that at lower altitudes, and when I say lower altitudes, I mean below 10,000 feet, you might have a little bit of difficulty getting the engines started just because it takes so long to get the engines up and running. Yeah, it shows that the engines are kind of hovering around, I believe, the 5,000 mark. 4,000 mark. Needless to say, whether you get both the engines started or not isn't really much of the issue. The big issue is getting them, well, I guess started, but getting them started to the point where they'll actually be effective. As you can tell, I moved the throttle and there was no success. Now, one of the engines just got up to speed, so that's good. And you are about to see what I mean by that, because the other engine hasn't spooled up just yet. So yeah, that's starting the engines 101 in a nutshell. As for landing this plane, it is pretty easy if you know what you're doing. The first time I tried landing this thing, I landed too hard, destroyed a landing gear in the process. So there's definitely an art that you need to perfect. But it basically involves making sure you're at the proper speed. The Goldilocks zone for the speed being just right is in between 300 and 400 kilometers an hour. If you are under 300, then that means that you're going to descend way too quickly. But if you're over 400, your flaps will retract to prevent damage. So you have a very small window to make sure that you do this right. But if you do it right, then you will have a good landing. the ideal landing speed is going to be about 250 kilometers an hour. Just don't do what I did and pull back on the throttle way too soon. Also, I guess I am a little bit low on the glide slope. But that's perfectly fine. Then you pull the throttle all the way back. I did a little bit of ballooning. But I regardless touch down. Then you deploy your drag chute and you go from there. And that's how you land the plane. It isn't too difficult if you ask me. So, for dogfighting, as you can imagine, it is a little bit difficult considering it is a Vietnam-era airplane. However, it is a very maneuverable plane, so it does have that going. In fact, there have been many times where I just almost blacked out and, that guy flew into a mountain, so, fuck him. But yeah, so I'm doing a dogfight against these F-5s with the air-to-air missiles. The problem is that the air-to-air missiles, as you can imagine, are, what's the best way to put it? Garbage. But, in the sense of trying to get behind an enemy on the 6 o'clock, this is your ideal. Oh shit. Oh, god damn it. What the fuck just happened? Anyway, back to dogfighting. So your missiles are going to be absolute garbage, so if they don't hit, your best bet is to go with air-to-air guns. So let's see if it's even possible. Well, there are two things that I learned. One, nope, and two, I need to be better at my dogfighting skills. I need to practice more. Whatever, screw it. There, problem solved. You happy now? I certainly am. Anyway, this is the MiG-19. Whether you want to destroy capitalist pigs over Vietnam or genocidal farmers over Cambodia, it is the ideal go-to plane. Hope you guys enjoyed, and with that said, you have a nice day.